Okay, riffs, rants, and ramblings. I guess I'm back. I haven't been hit by a bus. I just, I have a job, and it kills my creativity. I can now understand why a lot of successful artists are poor, miserable bastards. It is basically the half point of the NBA season, and I wanted to do just a quick recap of the Celtics season up to this point, because it's been a hell of a ride and very interesting. So, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. There's a lot of bad shit to talk about. And then there's some good stuff again. So I'm going to do what we often call a shit sandwich, where I'm going to start with the good news, and then I'm going to give you the bad news, and then we'll end with some more good news. So to start with the good news, I mean, if you look at the preseason hype or expectations surrounding this team, I think ESPN, those fucking chodes, had the Celtics like 10th? Behind the Brooklyn Nets, maybe winning like 46 games, which I thought was really insane. My preseason expectations for this team, I think I had them winning 52 games. This year, I think I had them 7th or 8th in the power rankings. And I remember at the time that was considered to be really optimistic. So here we are basically halfway through the season. The Celtics are 28-14. They're on pace to win 54 games. They have a borderline top five offense and defense. They're 4th in net rating at plus 6.5 a game. So, I mean, realistically, if you were just to look at their record so far and their projections and where they were expected to be at this point in the season, you would have to say that the season has been good, that we should be happy with the progress made. I mean, technically speaking, they're even better than my preseason expectations, which were already considered to be pretty optimistic. Continuing with some of the good news, obviously Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are the cornerstones of this team. And there have been so many trade rumors surrounding really both of them throughout their tenure as Boston Celtics. And a lot of people criticize Danny Ainge for committing to them and not putting them in trades. You know, he seemed to be very adamant all along that these guys were our future, that they were our cornerstones, that they could both be superstars. And honestly, it was a risk, and it still is a risk. But looking at the way those two guys have played this season, you have to say that it looks like it's a gamble that is starting to pay off. So let's start with Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown could really be an all-star this year. I don't think he's going to get it. I think he's going to get snubbed, but he's really stepped his game up this year. He's on a whole nother level than we've ever seen him before. And there are really multiple different facets of his game that he's improved since last year that I want to get into. First of all, if you just look at the numbers, you know, most of the time, young players that are going to develop into superstars, usually it's the third year in the league that they make a leap and they start to show you that they could be that kind of player. Now, obviously, last year with Jaylen Brown's third year, and it was a really fucking disappointing year. I mean, most of his statistics went down. His three-point shooting percentage went down. His free throw percentage stayed stagnant as it had the year before. His rebounding numbers went down a little bit. His points even went down. He only averaged 13 points per game last year. And granted, his minutes also went down, so that is accounting for some of that. But, you know, up until this point in his career, Jaylen Brown being a great player was always more theoretical than it was a reality. And this is the first year that he's really become a great fucking player. So he's averaging 20 points per game this year. He's averaging nearly 7 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's shooting 39% from 3 again, just like he did his sophomore season. And he's shooting 75% from the free throw line. So, I mean, we can start there. Everybody always talked about he needs to improve his free throw shooting, because one of the things that Jaylen Brown does quite well is get to the free throw line, or at least draw contact. And yeah, he's getting to the free throw line 4.5 times per game this year, which still isn't great, but is getting better. And he's making 75% of his free throws, which is a fucking massive improvement, considering that his first 3 years in the league, he shot 68, 64, and then 65%. I always said if he could get up to like 75 or 80%, he'd be a totally different player. And he's well on his way to doing that. I mean, that's a huge leap, and it's really gives you reason for optimism with him moving forward to see that kind of improvement. Obviously, he's incredibly effective scoring the ball. I mean, as far as percentages go, He's always been pretty effective. I mean, even his first year in the league, he shot 45% from the field. This year, he's shooting nearly 50%, 49% from the field, 39% from three. Very efficient, and 75% from the line. These are great numbers. And his rebounding has skyrocketed as well. I don't know if this is necessarily due to him being a better rebounder as much as it might be due to the Celtics scheme and the fact that we don't really have a big man, and we rely on our wings a lot to get rebounds for us, and we'll get into that with Tatum as well. Obviously, his defense is still really solid, but yeah, the numbers are great. The free throw shooting, obviously, I've touched on it as well. How is he scoring more points? Well, sure, the free throw shooting helps, but it's very clear that there's a few wrinkles that Jaylen Brown has added to his game in the offseason. One of the first things we saw when the year started was the ability for him to finish with his left hand. And this was something that just didn't exist last year or the year before, or really ever before in his career. And it was very apparent in the first dozen or so games that this was a skill that he now has in his toolkit, and it really, really helps him, because before, I think a lot of people could just understand that he was going to try to drive right. He was going to use his right hand. He was going to drive right, and you could just kind of shunt him to the left. Well, you can no longer do that, because now he can drive to both sides, and he's gotten really good at finishing with his left hand, and that's really helped him be a more efficient scorer. Another thing you can see is just, he's always been an awesome athlete, obviously, but in his first couple years in the league, not only did he have loose handles, but he was out of control a lot of times when he was driving to the hoop. You could tell he could use his athleticism to get there, but once he got there, he didn't really know what to do. Well, this year, the game has slowed down for him, and he's really patient on his drives to the hoop. He changed his speed. His handle has definitely tightened up, and he knows how to just, use smart techniques. He knows how to do up fakes. He knows how to use his body better. He's just a better finisher around the rim than he ever has been before. So all that helps him basically be a better player this year and a borderline all-star. And really, it refurbishes that dream that us Celtics fans have of this guy being a potential all-star player. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but he could definitely be a solid star player, an all-star player, a two-way star, and he looks like he's on his way to doing them. He's only 23 years old, so so often with these young players, them getting to that level is just about, are they able to make improvements to their game every year? And it was really worrying, because last year, which should have been the big year for him, we didn't see that, and this year, his fourth year, we're finally seeing it. So that's awesome. That's great news. The other cornerstone of the Celtics organization, obviously, is Jason Tatum. And Jason Tatum also had a really underwhelming season last year. So, I mean, if you look at his numbers, actually, since he's come into the league, his efficiency has gone down every single year. I mean, his first year, he shot 47%, last year, 45%, this year, 43%. His three-point percentage his first year, 43%, last year, 37%, this year, 36%. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because obviously he was taking a lot less shots his first year. And he's taking a lot more shots this year than he did last year. And even the shot profile, the shots that he's taking, are different. Most of his three-pointers his first year and even his second were catch and shoot, whereas a lot of his three-pointers this year are off the dribble. So they're more difficult shots. He has had a problem with efficiency, although I wouldn't really say he's an inefficient shooter. He's got a great shot. His biggest issue this year is just finishing around the rim. It's a glaring weakness of his, and definitely something that he needs to improve. But when you look at how much he's improved year by year, and the fact that he's still only 21 years old, you have to imagine that he's going to be able to improve that. I mean, if you think of Tatum coming out of the draft, everybody knew he was a good isolation scorer and a good mid-range shooter. The major criticisms about his game was that he didn't play defense, and people had genuine concerns on whether or not he could be a good defender, because oftentimes he was flat-footed and just didn't exert the effort and seemed a bit slow. And also his three-point shooting. I mean, he was not a good three-point shooter at Duke. He didn't really show that aspect of his game. Now you look at Jason Tatum here in his third season for the Boston Celtics, and his defense is fucking awesome this year. And he's a really good three-point shooter. I mean, he's making 2.5 three-pointers on 6.5 attempts a game, only shooting 36%, which isn't a great number. It's barely above league average, but again, a lot of those shots are difficult off-the-dribble shots. And the fact that he's been able to turn two of his supposed weaknesses into strengths, I just think that bodes really well for him moving forward. When you look at his game and you want to criticize it, you want to nitpick it, and I certainly have been guilty of that at times this year, you want to say, like, okay, he can't finish around the rim. He's still not getting to the free throw line enough, and he's a bit inconsistent. I don't think there's any doubt that these are areas that he can and most likely will improve in. He's 21 years old. And you look at his shoulders, just how broad they are, and you imagine he's still going to fill out. He's just going to get stronger and bigger, and I think that'll help him finishing around the rim. And, the free throws, they're up. Last year, 3 free throws a game. This year, 4. It's still not enough. You want to see that number get up to like around 6 if he's really going to become a superstar. But I think that after the really disappointing season last year, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism around Jason Tatum and the possibility that he could genuinely become a superstar player. And I think, honestly, the offense has been cool and everything. I mean, he's averaging 21.5 points per game as a 21-year-old. He's got 7 rebounds, 3 assists. But I think for me, the biggest difference is just the defense. I mean, he always had the potential to be a good defender. He has really long arms. But this is the first year I've seen him. It seems like he's really reading the passing lanes well. His steals have gone up, 1.5 steals a game almost this year. And using his length really well and just playing hard on that end. And if he ever wants, and he's talked about it as well, about how if you want to be a superstar in this league, you have to be great on both sides of the ball. And it looks like he's really trying to do that. So I think that for me is one of the biggest reasons for optimism, is if he's going to commit himself on the defensive end. If he's doing that already as a 21-year-old, I just think that bodes incredibly well for the future and for his development. So basically, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both have created, I think, a lot of optimistic feelings in Boston. Now, obviously, Kemba Walker is Kemba Walker. I mean, his stats are a little bit down compared to where they normally would be. But that's to be expected when he's gone from being the focal point of an offense to just another part of the offense. I think the biggest thing with Kemba Walker is that he's just a fucking incredible guy. He's just the most likable human being, and I've never heard anybody say a bad word about him. People just genuinely seem to like being around him, having him on the team. He's just a force for good. So even though he's a good player, and obviously we need him to be a good player for us, I think beyond that, even more importantly, is just the sort of vibe that he gives off, the aura of Kemba Walker, and just how different that is from that fucking pile of shit Kyrie, who we'll get to a little bit later, because of course, how could I go through a Celtics podcast without taking a giant steaming shit on Kyrie Irving? But yeah, as I said, the euphoric aura of Kemba Walker is just really beautiful, and it just gives this team a really nice, positive feeling, which obviously we did not have last year at all. I guess if I wanted to stretch it out and give one more piece of good news, I would say Enes Kanter, who, we got at a pretty reasonable price, has been just phenomenal. It's really great to watch him just gobble up rebounds. Like, I just remember the last 2 or 3 years of watching Celtics games, there will be at least once a game, every game, where I would just shout at the fucking TV, "Rebound the fucking ball!" Just losing my fucking mind as a team got 3, 4, 5 offensive rebounds and second chance points. I think I've only shouted that at the TV once this year. And I don't want to say that it's all because of Enes Kanter, but he's certainly had a huge part of that. So let's get into the bad. We have absolutely sucked penis since 2020 started. We've been losing to teams we shouldn't lose to, the Suns at home and the Pistons at home. We have been completely sunned and bitch-slapped and owned by Philadelphia, which just hurts my soul. Our bench is absolute fucking garbage, and these are real. To me, that's the biggest cause for concern, is our bench. all these fucking morons online are like, "Ooh, we need a big. Trade for Andre Drummond." Yeah, trade for fucking Andre Drummond. That's a great idea. Trade for a guy whose game makes no sense in the NBA, who shoots fucking 40% from the free throw line. He's going to help us win games. Literally the fucking dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. We don't need a big man. Big man is not the problem. I don't know where these people get this idea that we need a fucking big man. There are literally 2 big men in the NBA that people can't stop. It's Joel Embiid and Anthony Davis. And really, the only dudes that can stop those dudes are each other. So if you're not going to get one of them, just fuck off. Fuck off with the big man talk. There's no one out there that's going to really make a difference. I mean, I understand that Tice is undersized. I understand that Cantor is not great defensively, but, I mean, we're fine. We're rebounding the ball pretty well. Our defensive metrics are pretty good. Big man is not the problem. The problem is our bench. Our bench fucking blows. And, I mean, it just seems like every single team in the NBA has at least 1 or 2 guys that on any given night could come off the bench and score 20 points, or at least double-digit scoring. And we don't have one. I mean, besides Enes Kanter, we don't have a single guy on our bench that you could look at and say, he might go off for 15 or 20 tonight. You know, you just never know. He might get hot shooting. Semi Ojeleye, you think he's going to get hot shooting? He's fucking awful. He shouldn't even be on the roster. Brad Wanamaker? Brad Stevens fucking loves Wanamaker. I don't know if, like, he's got a picture of Brad Stevens, like, fucking a horse or something, and he's just going to blackmail him, and that's why he just keeps getting playing time. I don't understand the appeal with Brad Wanamaker. I know he's, like, kind of, sort of solid, but I hate him. I don't know why I hate him. I know it's an drastic overreaction, which is kind of what I'm known for, but I just really, really don't fucking like him. I would much rather see those minutes go to Tremont Waters, even though he's like 3.5 feet tall, just to see if there's anything there. I would much rather those minutes go to Romeo Langford, who we wasted the 14th pick on, unless we're actually going to give him some fucking minutes and see if he can play. I mean, this is where the biggest concern is with the bench, and a lot of it stems from the fact that we really haven't gotten jack shit out of our last 2 drafts, and it's fucking killing us. If you look back at the last 2 drafts, we drafted Robert Williams, and then this year we drafted Grant Williams, Romeo Langford, Carson Edwards, Tremont Waters. Not a single one of those fucking guys is giving us any kind of meaningful contribution to our bench this season. That's a lot of wasted draft capital. You got Robert Williams, who basically has fucking milk bones. He's got the bones of a fucking 90-year-old man. He gets hurt without even playing. Like, he doesn't even play, and then he's in the fucking hospital. So, you know, at this point, that guy, I love him. I love his game. I really desperately wanted him to be a part of our team this year, but he makes Gordon Hayward look like he's made out of steel. Like, he's just incredibly unreliable. You just cannot, in any way, shape, or form, rely on him, which is sad, but true. And then you look at our draft this year, and man, we had a lot of draft capital, and we've gotten jack fucking shit from it. So I hated the pick, Romeo Langford, at the time, and look, I watch him play, and I get that he's like a smooth slasher, should be a good scorer, and I want to like him. And he does great in the G League, but he hasn't done shit in the NBA. And I'm sorry, but I know he's young, but the 14th pick, you need production out of some kind of production out of that number. I mean, like, when we got fucking owned by Detroit recently, they had their pick, the guy they drafted at 15, one spot behind Romeo Langford, Sekou Doumbia, who's fucking 18 years old. He dropped like 24 points on us. He looked like Kevin Durant out there. So it's like all these teams getting production from the players they drafted around that spot. And then we've got Romeo, who's not doing shit, and people are like, oh, well, he's young. And yeah, I get it, he's young, but we fucking need help. And these are the draft picks. These are the guys that should be helping us, and they're not. They're just not. You know, we got really fucked because Miami took Tyler Hero, like the pick before us, and I'm like 99.9% sure that's who the Celtics were targeting. That's who we wanted. And honestly, if we had him, he would be our best bench player by a fucking country mile. He'd be exactly what we need. He's literally the exact thing that we need on this team right now, is a guy that can come off the bench and fill it up and make baskets. And, I mean, we thought Carson Edwards could be that guy. He lit it up in the Summer League, got us all really excited. He still plays really well in the G League, but he looks like a fucking 12-year-old when he plays in the NBA. He looks fucking awful, and he's been an absolute, incredibly disappointing bust so far. Now, that's not to say that maybe one more year in the league, and he's able to figure it out, and he can finally shoot the ball the way he did everywhere else in the NBA, but just as likely, he's just never going to ever fucking make a basket in the NBA, and he's going to disappear in 2 years. It's pretty much a 50-50 chance at this point. Again, Tremont Waters looks really nice, but he's 3.5 feet tall, and Brad doesn't seem to trust him. He just wants to play scrubby Wanamaker just because he's 6'4" and likes to jack up floaters, even though he misses them all the time. So, and then there's Grant Williams. Grant Williams, who seems like the most likable guy, but you know what? We don't need a fucking guy to smile. That's not what the bench needs. We don't need a guy who makes corny dad jokes and has a nice smile and does charity work. That's not what this bench needs. We don't need a guy that understands basketball. This bench needs a guy that can fucking score the ball. And Grant Williams right now is averaging 3 points per game with a 6 PER, which is like hardly even registered on the scale of PER. So our bench fucking blows. And we're not getting any production from our draft picks, and honestly, it's killing us. And I'm not really sure how we fix that moving forward. It's a real issue. It's a real issue. So if we're going to get back into the good, because remember I told you I was going to package you a shit sandwich, whatever I do when I feel really bad about myself or life or the Celtics or whatever, is I try to look at somebody else whose life is worse than mine to make myself feel better. And that's what you got to do with this team. If you feel bad about the Celtics and how they're playing and our bench and all of our wasted draft picks and the fact that every time we get draft picks for the future, that team just goes and makes the playoffs and destroys the value of our draft pick, and then the next year after that they absolutely fucking suck. Happened with Sacramento. It's happening with Memphis right now. Just fucking shoot me. You have to look at the Nets. Just go look at the Nets and look at what that fucking piece of shit Kyrie Irving has done to their team, and you can't help but just feel a little warmth and joy in your heart because the guy is such a unlikable scumbag, and everything that I said last year, everything I've been saying literally since we traded for him from Cleveland, I hated the trade. Everybody told me I was nuts. He was a superstar. I just can't get the image of him like trying to guard Giannis in the second round last year against the Bucks and just getting smoked. I'll never forget that. And now he's just gone to the Nets, a team that made the playoffs last year without him, and by all accounts was like a feel-good story. They were overachievers. They played hard. They seemed to really like each other. They were exciting to watch. And he's literally just destroyed any good feeling that team had last year. And everybody's uncomfortable. Everybody's on eggshells. They're underperforming. Kyrie's hurt all the time. And then when he does play, they lose. And then he blames all his teammates. Oh, it's fucking great. I'm just, really, whenever things get bad, I just look at the stories surrounding him and I instantly feel better. And then you can also look at Philly. I mean, despite the fact that they fucking own us, they've had a really disappointing year. I mean, they're behind us in the standings, not by much, but everybody was like penciling them in for being one of the top 3 teams in the NBA and maybe even competing for a championship, and they've just been kind of awful. I mean, defensively, they're pretty good, but their offense is a mess. And I think anybody that watches the 76ers, or has watched them over the last couple of years, is starting to realize, if they haven't already, that Embiid and Simmons just can't really play together. And there's going to come a time where Philly's going to have to decide to trade one or the other, because I really don't see how they can coexist. In the modern NBA, you just need everybody around the perimeter jacking threes. And if you're going to have a guy in the paint, it needs to be one guy, like the Bucks. The Bucks, for example, the best team in the NBA, they've got Giannis. Giannis controls the paint. Giannis drives the paint. Literally every other human being on that team is on the perimeter jacking threes. And it works incredibly well. Well, Philly's got 2 guys that want to be that guy. Embiid should be in the paint, but Simmons also has to live in the paint. And it just doesn't work. It jams things up, and it looks awful and feels awful, and it's one of the reasons why they've been underwhelming. And then you also look at Markelle Fultz, who they gave away for nothing, and he's like, seems like he's starting to come around this year, so that's just like another thing that Philly fucked up. So these are the kind of stories that you basically have to look at to feel better. But yeah, it's been kind of rough lately. I mean, it's just amazing how perspective alters so fast. At the preseason, I said this team would win 52 games, and I was optimistic. And, then we start the year, and we're playing great, and you just kind of get used to it. And then you lose a couple, and all of a sudden, like, the sky is falling. You're unhappy. It's just like you finally get to date that big titty girl you never thought you could get. First month or two is amazing. Then you start to sort of adjust to your new reality, and you start looking at her and being like, well, she could really do some sit-ups. And that's basically what I've done with the Celtics this year. I got used to how well we were playing at the start of the year, and I just started to expect that as the normal. My reality adjusted, and now that we've lost a couple of games, I'm unhappy. Even though technically we're still on pace to be better than we were last year and better than I had even said at the start of the year. So, I mean, there was a point just a few weeks ago where I literally stopped watching the games. I would just look at the result first and to see if I could watch it because, look, I don't want to be accused of being a fair weather fan. I'm not a fair weather fan. I never stop following my teams. What I am is I am an over-emotional fan. I am basically the Celtics and I are in a relationship, and I'm the girl. I'm the woman. And I get irrational and emotional, and, the Celtics are kind of like a boyfriend that beats up their girlfriend sometimes, but then also buys her flowers. Like, I'm in an abusive relationship with the Celtics, and sometimes they treat me really well, and I love them, and I'm like, oh, things are going great. And then sometimes I'm showing up to work with a black eye, and people are like, what happened? And I'm like, I fell down the stairs. And that's basically what I'm doing with the Celtics this year. And anyways, we just smashed the Lakers. Thank God for that, because we were playing like shit again. But that felt good, and so hopefully that'll be the start of us getting back to good basketball. So that's my mid-season checkup for the Celtics. I mean, I guess if I had to put like a grade on it, I would give us like a B+, A-. You have to be thrilled with the development of Jalen and Tatum for sure. I didn't even talk about Gordon Hayward because his story just depresses the living hell out of me. Like, he's just such a nice guy and likable guy, but when his fucking foot fell off, you just don't come back from that 100%, and he hasn't. He has games where he looks great. He has games where it looks like he might have left his foot on the court a couple years ago, and you just know that you're never going to be able to really depend on him, and it's just sad. So I don't really want to talk about it. Overall, the season's been pretty good, but it's stressful. I mean, the Eastern Conference is so much better this year than it was last year and the past few years that I do really feel like the Celtics need the second seed, or at worst the third seed. But I really think that second seed is where it's at, because we're not very good on the road. We haven't been very good on the road, and it's all about matchups. I mean, look, the Bucks are going to be the number one seed. They're heads and shoulders better than everybody else in the Eastern Conference. From 2 to 6 is like anybody's spot right now. I mean, Miami's got it now, but really it could be any one of the teams that are from 2 to 6. If we have to play Philadelphia in the first round, if it's like a 3-6 and we're the home court and we're playing Philadelphia, we could easily lose that series. They fucking owned us this year. So there's a reality where we get the third seed and we get bounced in the first round. That is a fucking disaster. If we get the fourth or the fifth seed, then let's say we win the first round. Second round, we're playing the Bucks at home. That's the end. We're going to get bounced in the second round, just like we did last year. The Bucks are fucking amazing. So, I mean, really, we need to play well enough to get that second seed. If we can get the second seed, maybe we play like Brooklyn in the first round at home. That'll be fun. Smacking Kyrie around. I mean, that would be glorious. And then in the second round, we'll still be at home, and we'll probably play, I don't know, maybe Indiana, maybe Miami, something like that. But I think we could beat maybe Toronto. I think we could beat any of those teams if we're at home. Then we get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And honestly, I don't think that this is a championship team this year. But I don't think that's the end of the world. I think if we can make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and lose to the Bucks, I think that is a successful season. Because the Bucks are just fucking amazing this year. And I don't think there would be any shame in losing to them in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I also feel like anything less than that, and you'd have to say that this year is a big disappointment. So much of that is going to come down to matchups and seeding. So hopefully the Celtics will be able to play well enough to get that second seed and home court up until the Eastern Conference Finals. But we'll see. I guess that's it for now. So I guess I'll do another one of these maybe when the playoffs are coming around. And until then, this has been Riffs, Rants, and Ramblings. Happy New Year.